Hi everyone, today we have the pleasure to be with Nigel Haddon-Paton, co-founder of Truffle UK Limited, and we are going to talk about truffle trees, truffle growing and truffles. Hi Nigel.
Good morning.
Can you tell about you to us? What's your nationality and where were you born?
Yeah, I'm English. I'm nearly 70 at the end of this month, and I was born on the Chiltern Hills, famous for the beech trees and the chalk in Hertfordshire, just north of London.
Right. Could you say to us about your hobbies as a child?
Gosh, it was such a long time ago. Hobbies. I'm not sure I had too many hobbies. I used to spend a lot of time on my pony riding. I had a mother who was mad about horses. She had 4 boys, so we were all on ponies all day long playing cowboys and Indians. I used to help on the farm during the harvest, and I used to do a bit of stamp collecting. Other than that, I can't really remember.
How and when did you discover the truffle?
Well, I never discovered truffle. I just read an article in a timber journal, and the editor was asking the readership if anyone was interested in growing truffle, and I rang him up and I said, "What's all this about?" And he said, "We've been sent some material, a brochure from a Kurdish plant scientist, Dr. Kanaga, and would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Let me have a look at it." And I looked at the video and I thumbed my way through the brochure, and Dr. Kanaga was operating in Hanover University, and he had a laboratory there and a lot of glass house. So I jumped on the next plane to Hanover, and that was the start of my journey.
So do you remember your first truffle tasting?
I do. I think the first one was, we were in Cahors. I'd been visiting Pierre Jean Pébert, who a lot of your viewers will, in the truffle world, will certainly know. And he'd recommended that we stayed in the Hôtel de Gare in Cahors, and in that hotel was the wonderful La Balandre restaurant. And the chef there was Gilles Mar, and he prepared a tasting menu. I think it was 5-6 courses of truffle, and it was completely sublime. And I remember my partner, Adrian Cole, I remember his wife, Mary Rose. We had a camera team with us, were filming us eating this fabulous meal. And I remember her taking a mouthful as the camera zoomed in on her, and she said, "Oh my goodness, this is God's breath."
Right, thank you. Could you talk to us about native truffles in UK and a few words about the truffle terroir in UK?
Yeah, sure. There's been a history of truffle in the UK going back hundreds of years. Indeed, there is much to be found on the internet about Alfred Collins, who, as they say, was the last of the truffle hunters, and he lived in the village of Winterslow, just north of Salisbury, and he used to go out truffle hunting with his dog on his bicycle, and he had a pannier in the back and a basket in the front, and he had his truffle in the front and he had his dog in the basket at the back, and he used to collect truffle most especially for Queen Victoria. So he would bicycle to Salisbury Station, he would put his box of truffle on the train, and it would be collected by the palace at the other end.
Wow. Can you talk to us about when and how did truffle trees plantation start in UK?
As I said, there's always been a history of truffle here. We've been finding them throughout the length and breadth of the south of England. But we'd never, I guess I was the one that actually started the first plantations here and trying to commercially grow truffle as is being done so successfully in France and Spain and Italy. Yeah, so I think I was probably the first one to establish a plantation.
Where did your research lead you, Nigel?
Well, having met Dr. Hanega in Hanover University, I did research on the internet. It was fairly early days, but I kept being led down to the Crop and Food Research Institute in South Island, New Zealand. And somebody who's become very famous now, Dr. Ian Hall, who was running the mycology department there. And I got talking to him, and he was coming to the UK, and I met with him, and I asked him all the questions about his experimentation and his research. And he said, well, you better come down to New Zealand and see what we're doing. And that's what I did. So I eventually acquired the intellectual property of the procedure for inoculating seedlings. And I eventually acquired the license for the European Union.
So I guess you did some plantation in UK. Could you talk to us about Sandringham one?
Yes.
Sandringham's one.
Yes, I did several, I've done several plantations in the sort of early 2000s, and in about, I think it was about 2012, I established a plantation at Sandringham on the request of the late Duke of Edinburgh, who was passionate about mushrooms and particularly truffle. And we've identified a site on their very a sandy, calcareous, chalky soil, and that planted about 400 or 500 trees for the Duke.
Let's talk about tuber melanosporum in UK. Is that possible for you?
Well, I found by accident that some of the seedlings that I had planted at Sandringham, I must have got the inoculum muddled up, because we found melanosporum in that plantation, which was extraordinary, but I don't think entirely surprising. You consider in the vineyards that we're establishing in the UK, nearly all on chalk, throughout Dorset and Wiltshire and Sussex and Kent, that they are now able to grow the varieties unheard of before in the UK. Before it was Müller-Thurgau and Rieslings, and now we're able to grow Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So it has to be something to do with the climate, and you know, why not? It seems that we are now able to grow melanosporum.
So how did your relationship start with AgriTrue?
Well, I needed to do a lot of research. I mean, I knew nothing about truffle, and so France was the obvious place to go, and I found out that there were various truffle workshops which attracted people from all over the world. And so I went to quite a few of those, and each time I would see a lot of the same faces. And Damien Belleroux at AgriTrue was somebody who I enjoyed his company. He was clearly very professional, very knowledgeable, and I was looking for a partner, and it seemed an obvious team to work together with.
Nigel, for you, what's the future of truffles in UK?
Well, I think it's extremely encouraging. As we're standing here now doing this film, Antoine Bouffard from AgriTrue and myself are visiting, I think, 33 farms and estates of individuals who've shown an interest in pursuing the planting of truffle orchards. And so I read in the paper only last week that they were saying that in 30 years' time, the UK will be the epicenter of truffle growing. And it seems that way in the wine industry. So watch out, the Brits are coming.
Nigel, to finish this interview, could you tell us an anecdote about truffles, please?
Of course. I've got many. I think one which is enduring was when we took, in the early days of my research with Adrian Cole, my partner, we took ourselves to France, obviously, and we had a film crew with us to do this documentary. And we were with Hugues Martin, who had quite a large Truffier in Bergerac. And he'd been telling us about we'd been tasting and smelling a whole range of truffle that he had there, Melanosporum and Brumale, and showing us the difference. And so we'd been doing a lot of this. And we then said, well, how do you find truffle? And he explained, you know, with a dog and with a pig and with la mouche. And we said, la mouche? He said, yes, the fly, the truffle fly. And at that moment, a fly landed right on the end of his nose. And he said, oh, here is la mouche. And the mouche, of course, had been smelling the truffle that we'd just been sniffing moments before. But that was a great little piece on camera.
Well, thank you, Nigel, for your time.
My pleasure.